Alright, for step 5, we're going to do the female headers for the ESP32 and TFT, and we're also going to do the microphone breakout. And we'll start with the microphone breakout first. So you're going to need the microphone breakout board, as well as the 3 pins that it came with. So make sure you have this in the right orientation. Make sure the big pins are facing, so you want to see VCC, ground, and audio, right side up. So the first thing we're going to do is insert. We're going to go ahead and flip. Well, let's go ahead and tape it, just to keep it there. These you could probably just solder the pins, but we're going to be, without the board there, but we're going to be consistent. So flip it, and it's these 3 pins right here. Okay. Once you solder those pins in, just inspect it. Make sure that they look good, they do. Then we're going to flip it on the other side. Double check VCC, ground, and audio. So now you're going to come in here, drop it down, there we go. So you should have a nice flat, relatively flat-ish board there. Okay, so now we're going to cut the female headers for the ESP32. What I did, first thing I did was I counted the number of pins here. There are 19, and then I marked it with a Sharpie. And go ahead and do that with both of your female headers. Make sure that you mark it. I always like to do that just so I know where to cut. Now what you're going to do, this is a little tricky. You're going to cut the pin, you're going to cut next to it, so don't try to cut that pin. You're going to probably break it, so cut the neighbor. And this takes a little bit of practice, so it doesn't really matter which way you cut it, but you want to cut. So as you can see, I've got my flush cutters positioned right after the neighbor. So the 20th pin is where I'm cutting, right after that. Alright, and if you did it right, you should have 19 pins. If you did it wrong and you're short, then you gotta probably use another set. If you're long, then you're okay. In my case, I actually am a little long, so I'm gonna come back. There we go. It doesn't matter if you have a little extra plastic. You can trim that up if you want. Sometimes I'll just come in here and try to make it nice and neat, but you really don't want to do too much because it's easy to accidentally cut into that other pin. Okay. So I've got my 19 pins now. You can see here's the Sharpie one that I marked. And then you just kind of make sure you got the right number. Then you're just going to repeat that. Actually, with my particular pin headers, what I just cut gave me just enough pins, so I don't have to, so I can use this. Your pin headers may be a little different. I'll just clean this up. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to get the ESP32 and take your ESP32 out of the package. And then you're going to fit your pin headers, fit it into your pin headers. Make sure there's a pin below every pin. Just double check. So if you're missing a pin, something's not going to work right. And try to put them in as straight as possible. If you do have any bent pins, fix them with a pair of pliers. Otherwise, it's not going to work very well for you. Okay. All right. Again, double check that you got the right number of pins. Then you're going to dry fit. So make sure you look for where the USB is supposed to be. It's supposed to be on this side. If you solder this backwards, it's not a huge deal because you can just pull it out, put it back in. But that's how that should look. So now we're going to, before we solder that, we're going to do the ESP or the TFT screen. Same drill. All right, so on the TFT pins, there are 14 right here. So I went ahead and I counted 14 over, I marked it, and now I'm going to cut the neighbor pin. Okay. And I still have my one I marked with a Sharpie, so that's good. I'm going to clean it up just a tiny bit. Okay. I'm going to insert there, make sure I got them all in there. And then I'm going to do the same thing over here, but I only need 4. So rinse and repeat, mark my 4th pin. So I need 4, I got the extra. It's okay. Just trim it back a little bit. And clean it up. Okay, good enough. And then I'm going to fit that in, just to make sure I got all 4 pins. Okay. Now again, you're not going to solder anything without the TFT in there. Otherwise, you're going to have a mess. It's going to be really hard to get it in. Okay, so I went ahead and got the TFT out. I noticed these male pins are in. However, these are not. You're going to need those as well. Go ahead and leave the protector on. Looks like mine did not include male pins, so luckily I've got some extras. But you're going to need 4 of them, so I'm just going to go ahead and break 4. And then I'm going to, before I do anything with that, I'm going to solder these in. In this case, since we're going into female pins, we want the long side on the bottom, not the short side like we did earlier. So you should just be able to set that in place and solder it right there. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. Okay. Go ahead and inspect them. There you go. You can see the... Now if you're not happy with them, you can apply a little bit of heat and bend them, or you don't even really need to do that. You can just kind of bend them with a pair of pliers if they're not exactly straight. The other thing you can do, put them in, make sure there's a pin underneath each thing. And this should be a pretty tight fit. It shouldn't be going anywhere. Okay. Now you're going to fit them into the socket just like we did with the ESP32. Going to dry fit them. Now I would recommend taping at this point, because these things like to fall out. Just get one big piece of tape. Alright, so that tape again is just going to hold it in place so we can easily solder it. You can see here's the headers that I did on the TFT, these 2 sets, and then here are the headers for the ESP32. Alright, now you can remove the tape. Alright, now something we didn't do, what we're going to do next is insert the shift register. So your shift register is this piece here. There is a notch on it. The notch should be going to the left. I'm sorry, to the right. And the left is it depends which way your board's oriented. So there is a little notch on the IC. You want to line up that notch to the IC. Now in this case, I'm going to have to bend these a little. I'm just going to gentle pressure. You certainly don't want to manhandle it. You can also use your fingers if you don't have needle nose pliers. I recommend doing kind of one side and then sliding them in. Yeah, I gotta go a little bit more. Okay, so I've got the shift register in place. Make sure it looks nice and lined up in the socket, and make sure your notch is right here. Alright, at this point we can insert our TFT. There is also room for an SD card that you can put in here. Oops. Okay, going in nice and neat. Okay, at this point we've really got just about everything done on the board. So the only thing that we have remaining would be the battery holder, which is going to go right here. There's also a battery charger, which goes here. There's also an expansion pins that you can put on, but we're not going to use that right away, so we're just going to leave that blank.